Joining me live now is former Australia Ambassador to the US, Arthur Sinodinos. Arthur, great to talk to you. A really interesting program we've got lined up with Chris Yulman tonight. Just before we get on to the other issues of the day, if we could take a kind of broader view of where Australia sits with, the US preparing for war, the rise of China, where would you say our preparation is at? Are we probably not where we need to be, but are you positive or negative about it?
Look, our mindset is that we do have to be ready, in theory, at any time for something to happen. That's the whole point of having defence forces, intelligence forces and all the rest of it. The question would be, at the moment, are we as fully ready as we should be? We've had a Defence Strategic Review a couple of years ago. That is still being digested. That is leading to decisions about capability and the like. But the debate about whether we've got the right set of capabilities and the right level of spending is going to continue because, as was pointed out in your report, the strategic situation around us does seem to be deteriorating at a time when we are also unsure about our relationship with our main treaty ally, the United States. And that's adding a further layer of uncertainty into the calculations. And for Australia, that means how do we further cement that alliance, but also work on developing further our other relationships with trusted allies and partners in the region like New Zealand, Japan, Korea, the Philippines, and so on.
It's really interesting to watch Donald Trump at the moment because, of course, he was elected as a president who would get America out of wars, not into them. I think maybe it's too early to say, but the bombing raid on Iran's nuclear facilities does look like a one and done. Absolutely. At this point, of course, there's always a chance for retaliation down the track, but he's vindicated in that sense, at least to date. And also this upcoming meeting with Putin in Alaska. How significant is that in your view?
Well, it's very important for Putin because he wants to get close again with Trump. Trump's been a bit impatient with Putin because he feels that Putin has been dragging the chain on the Ukraine issue. This is an opportunity for Putin to put his case directly and try and get a settlement with Trump, which can then be used to override the objections of the Ukrainians. The main leverage that the President Trump has in this situation is the support he can provide to the Ukrainians and the sanctions he can put further on Russia. And so this is a situation where, for Putin, there's a lot to play for here. I think he feels like he had to have this meeting because the President Trump's patience was running out. But it's not clear to me what the outcome of this will be. Certainly not an outcome that Zelensky is likely to be comfortable with, and therefore whether it can be enforced on the ground unless President Trump makes the decision to take arms and other support away from the Ukrainians and basically half Nelson them into an agreement.
Yeah, I think the move to lay massive tariffs on India was a really interesting and significant move as well because they're the ones buying all of the Russian oil. But I should be pointing out, Australia buys that same energy, that same oil off India as well. So the flow-on effects are quite large there. We also look at this with the backdrop today of reports coming out of Australia that we might, the Sydney Morning Herald more accurately, that we might recognise a Palestinian state. What caveats would be in place, I don't know, but this follows the lead of certainly the UK, France and Canada, who have their own separate caveats on the issue. And that has drawn the ire of Benjamin Netanyahu. What do you think about that move from Albanese and the comments from Netanyahu?
Well, look, I'm not surprised that Benjamin Netanyahu would be unhappy about Australia potentially recognising the state of Palestine. The problem here is that these things are all being done in a bit of a vacuum. There's no settlement of the overall issues between the two parties that we're talking about, the Israelis and the Palestinians. Where are the hostages in all this? What are the guarantees about no future attacks on Israel, for example? What guarantees about the viability of a Palestinian state? There really needs to be a settlement here, a proper settlement. And the only ones who can do a proper settlement really are the Americans. At the end of the day, they have the leverage in this situation. They have the leverage over Netanyahu, and they have the leverage more broadly because they can provide assistance and other resources to the table. The Europeans and all the others can help, but it's up to the Americans. So ultimately, if we want a proper settlement in this, it requires a comprehensive Middle East policy from the Trump administration.
Yeah, that's right. And look, we watch Trump's words very carefully when it comes to any comments about Netanyahu himself, the actions of the Israeli government and what's happening in Gaza. He has commented recently on the famine in Gaza and said, you know, that's something that needs to be sorted out. Do you sense there is a slight uncomfortableness from Trump with what's going on in Gaza, or am I misreading that?
No, I think you're right. And part of the reason is that the president is very visual. When this stuff is being shown on television day after day, and he monitors television all the time. He's watching television through the day, most of the night, and tweeting accordingly or sending out stuff on Truth Social. He reacts to what he's seeing. There's also a view here in Washington that Melania Trump is also someone who's drawn attention to this, and I think the president has referenced this publicly. So I think he's uncomfortable with the images he's seeing because he feels like, well, you know, I backed Netanyahu to finish the job, but if we're going to have this long drawn-out process where we see the vision of what's happening in Gaza on the ground, and this is the nature of modern warfare, particularly in urban settings, that would be, I think, making him think, well, we're going to find a way through and either get the job done quickly, over and done with, or find a way through so that we can not have these images on television.
Yeah. Well, we should send him a link to AM Agenda as well. It's about the right time for him to be watching into the evening there in DC. But Arthur, I just want to ask you one final question before I let you go, because I don't think this can be ignored. When Canada recognised Palestine or said it would make a move to do so, there was a Truth Social tweet from Donald Trump that said, oh, it's going to be really hard to do a trade deal with Canada now that they're moving towards recognising a Palestinian state. So, look, I know the Albanese government wants to deal with Donald Trump on issues such as trade and Palestine in silos. That is not how Donald Trump works. If Anthony Albanese does make this move, we hear it's imminent, do you think that will affect any further trade negotiations or meetings?
Look, on one level, if it's done with a number of other countries, it may well be that in a sense, no one country gets singled out. But you're absolutely right to say that in this administration, issues, whether it's trade, national security or other issues, do get linked. We've seen this in the case of Europe, where, you know, around issues to do with defence, freedom of speech, not just about trade. So you're right, this could elicit some form of retaliation. Again, it depends how much President Trump is focused on Australia at the moment. And there's an old quote from Henry Kissinger. He said, you know, when he was shaving in the morning, he wasn't thinking about Australia. Let's wait and see.
Yeah, I don't think Donald Trump is either, sadly. Arthur, great to talk to you as always.
Thanks.